esteemed guests and fellow citizens, a good afternoon. Welcome back to your favorite series, the Inter-University Debate Show. It is an honor to introduce to you today's topic, which is the cost of education versus the quality of education, a student's perspective. My name is Sharon Mukisa and I am your host for this particular segment. With me, I have a panel of distinguished guests who are educators, who are advocates, and whose views we cannot wait to hear. So in no particular hierarchy, I am going to introduce from the very last person over there, who is Aduet Alex, who is a graduate from UCU. We are so privileged to have you here today.
Thank you.
And next we have Haruna Nyombi, who is the former Guild Speaker of IUIU. It is a privilege having you here.
It's my pleasure to be here.
And next is a namesake of mine, Mary Sharon Karoje, who is a student at Chambogo University and the president of the debate club. Sharon, it's an honor having you here again.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Julius, who is Julius Mon, correct me?
Muonge.
Julius Muonge, who is a graduate of Makerere University and undertaking a back course at LDC Kampala campus and a legal trainee. It is a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you.
Okay, so today's topic is around education, and education being a cornerstone of development in the country. Uganda has taken so many strides to ensure that there is access of education throughout the country. However, there are still some challenges that we are still facing, and some people cannot access education even to date. And one of those challenges is poverty. Poverty is such a huge challenge to the education sector. We find that so many people cannot afford education because of the various costs they incur, setting from uniforms, setting from fees that they have to pay, tuition. All these fees altogether are so high and exorbitant for so many parents today. So diving into this discussion, we'd like to know what are those challenges that you think education is facing besides the costs that we are about to look at in a few. What are the other challenges that you think should be addressed that are in the education sector? Yes.
Thank you for hosting me once again. And I believe some of the challenges we face, besides the costs, which is the biggest, which takes the highest percentage of our challenges, I think we have to look at our transport and network system. Our roads are so bad. Have you been to the villages? And then people struggle to come and study in Kampala from their various places because the transport and the network system is not okay. Then from there we also have to look at the quality of education that side versus here. That is also another thing. People prefer schools this side because they believe they are urban and people will like their papers are more accredited as compared to those outside the city center and what. And then there are very few schools that have papers that are accredited. When you go to high school, we look at the G8 schools. So if someone doesn't get into the G8 schools, they feel like I haven't made it in life. And
what are some of those G8 schools?
You really want me to mention them?
At least like two.
We have St. Mary's College, SMAC, and then we have Mount St. Mary's, Namagunga. Those are at least some. Then there's maybe Gayaza, I think Nabisunsa. Yes, but I think those are the two key challenges I can talk about. Yes.
Okay, basing on that, I mean, is it written somewhere that these are the best schools, or it is just your perspective? And
I can't say it's my perspective, but because these are schools that have been there for a long time, you can't tell me a traditional parent, or even me myself, when I reach that time of producing and my child, it's now time to take them to school. There's no I'll sit and be like, I'm going to take my child to a school that has just begun 2 years ago. I don't trust their papers. I'll obviously opt for schools that have been there because I trust by the time they have taken a long time in the field and they have been able to produce products that are actually being seen for their works, then that is the school that I am to take them to, not a school that has been there for just 2 years or something. So I look at that time, and then you also look at the values that they produce these children with. You look at Christianity and all that. Yes.
Thank you very much. So actually, before we dive into our discussion, I would like maybe to inform the viewer of how the education system is in Uganda, given that we have primary education, which takes about 7 years. And then we'd have secondary education, which takes 6 years. Then one proceeds to tertiary, or they can choose university education, which, depending on the courses, can go for 3 years to 4 to even 5 years of education. So you have given your perspective on those schools that you think that a parent can opt for because they have been there for a longer time, because over time they've proven that these are good schools. So bring the same question to our next speaker. I would like to know, what are your indicators of a quality school, a quality education?
Thank you so much, Sharon. Before we go into that question, let's first let our viewers know what we're talking about. If you're talking about education, you're talking about a right that everyone is entitled to as a child. And where there is a right, that means there is an obligation somewhere for someone to provide that right to that person who is entitled to it. Now, in Uganda, it's a constitutional right. Every child has a right to attain quality education, right? That is one. Now, who is supposed to provide that education to that child? That should be our next question. Now, under our constitution, at least a child to get quality education, it is the responsibility of the parent, but not only the parent, it's mandatory also on government, right? So those two have to make sure that every child attains good and quality education. And if it's quality education, it should be even affordable, right? That's another thing that we must know. Now, before I came here, I've been looking at the statistics. In primary, according to the census for 2024, it's approximately 9 million. That's about 8.9 million pupils in primary schools. Then about 4.5 that are attending secondary school. Then you can include these others in the university. But I think my focus should be on this primary and even secondary education, because that makes the majority of these students. That's the number of the people that we are having according to the national census in 2024. But then, if you're talking about the responsibility, we have parents and also government. Now, government does not sponsor students or even pupils in private schools. So for a few maybe that they are, but the majority, we have programs, the universal secondary education and the universal primary education. There is some report that I was reading, and government puts in money. They sponsor these pupils and students in UPE and USE, and according to the report, they are giving about 20,000 per student. I think it's called the per capita grant that they are giving to the schools. The support that they are extending to the schools for every student that is attending in that particular school. So what I want to bring your attention to is that the government of Uganda, who is now the biggest parent, I don't know, in quotes,
Yes.
that who has the biggest responsibility of taking care of our education, at least for the majority of people that are going into in primary school, government only affords to pay for them 20,000. Then when it comes to secondary, that is USE, and you will agree with me that many students are in these schools. There are just a few that are in private schools, or even who can afford private schools. So if you cannot afford the Namagungas, I don't know that's where you went. Which school did you go to?
St. Joseph's Girls SS.
Okay. So these others who cannot afford Nabingo, maybe Namagunga, government is paying for them 150,000 Ugandan shillings. So that's what I wanted to bring your attention to. So having those figures in our minds, we can now go back to now the quality education. If someone, they are paying for them 20,000, does this match with what they are getting really from that particular school? If someone is being paid for 150,000 as their capitation grant for their stay in that school, basing on the inflation, the material that they are using, the teachers that are supposed to attend to these students, and everything that they need. Remember, these are people from the rural areas, people from families that are not doing well. And ideally, that's the majority of the population that we have in Uganda. People cannot afford, because going by the standards and also by the statistics, you look at the employment levels, the minimum wage, how many people can afford, are working, and their salary is about 1 million. That's a minimum if you went on, to get into the statistics. So those are just a few people that we can have. So ideally, the majority of people, or an average Ugandan, you would say, if they're working so hard, they can be maybe earning about 700,000. That's averagely between 500 and 700,000. So that means they cannot afford the other schools, and they are paying for this. The government is paying 150,000 for this student. Can really that 150,000 really translate into what we want as Ugandans, or as the people, what we desire to have, and also be able to compete with other people who are attaining education, maybe from other places, if not in Namagunga, where she went, I don't know. It could be in that very village. So that's what we should be asking ourselves in that respect. So if you are talking about quality education, how much are we funding? Remember, in our national budget, I think it is the Dakar Declaration. In the Dakar Declaration, they are saying that government is supposed to allocate from our national budget. From our national budget, ideally it should be 5%. Okay, they call the initial declaration. It is 20%. Then of our GDP from the Dakar Declaration should be 5%. But what we are injecting from our national budget, what we are investing in our education system, is less than 2%. Okay, so that one cannot translate to what we really desire as a country, and this has been decreasing from time, from time to time. When they introduced universal primary education, I think in 1990s, around 1999, the spending was quite big, but every other year the budget has been decreasing. Does it mean that now we have obtained what we really desired, and so there is no longer any need for us to invest in our education, given the advancement globally in terms of technology, in terms of innovation? I believe we should be increasing our budget other than just reducing on that budget, but year in, year out. And I'll give you an example. In 2023, 2024, our government invested, like I told you, our GDP spending on the student per student, according to the declaration for Dakar, is 5%, and now as is now 2.2%. Now realize per capita education, $50 is what they are giving to the students, right? Then in 2023, 2024, of the 52.7 trillion that was our national budget, it's only 8.4 that went to education. But then that was slightly, that was less than what they had allocated to the budget, because previously the budget was 48.1, but the budget was the portion that was allocated to the education sector was 8.7. Then when you go to other years, in 2024, now this is the current, I think the current year, 2025, 2026, it is now 6.7. The previous year, 2024, 2025, it is 8%. You see, it's reducing from 8.7 in 2022, 2023, 2020, 2024, 8.4. It's gradually reducing.
Yes.
Does it mean that we are now doing well, so we should reduce? That's something that we should be asking ourselves. Then the other thing that I'm seeing is that government is abrogating its responsibility about education, leaving it to the private sector, right? You're seeing they are giving 20,000 to the UPE schools where they are funding, but then they are liberalizing this education sector.
But
Yes.
don't you think the reason as to why the money keeps going down, it's because right now you'd have foreign funding has pulled out.
Mhm.
That is why the money right now is lower, because the budget was read and it was 5.04 trillion to the education sector
Yes.
previously last month. And could that be a reason because we don't have more funding right now? Because, you know, there is a strain on funding. That is why it's less right now
Sure.
in the education sector. Don't you think that is one of the reasons as to why it's a low amount? to
Well,
the
someone will
education
argue like
sector?
that, but then you look at the priorities that we're having as a country. We're talking about education. It ranks fourth in our priorities in funding. The first one is governance. The second one is security. The other one is infrastructure. So I want you to do now a survey. You start now trying to analyze each one individually. Okay? If it's about governance, if governance is taking the first position in terms of our priorities, how are we doing in that respect? The money that we are spending there. And we're talking about governance, we're talking about elections, people that we are voting into power, maintaining them in power, trying to take care of them. Okay? Now, this goes beyond just paying, but also even the salaries and wages we're paying. How much does your MP earn vis-a-vis what your primary teacher is earning? Okay? So, the MP it takes this portion that is being given to governance. When you go to security, how much are we paying to security? And really, does it really deserve to be given to them?
Is it for the people?
When you go to the infrastructure, being the third, does it really translate how much we are giving to the infrastructure sector? Does it translate with what you're seeing on ground? Really? So that's what we should be asking. So our priorities, how we are spending on them, and exactly having an accountability of the funds that we are spending in that respect. Yeah, I think that's, we can now try to analyze that as well before we bring that argument.
And also, when the budget was read, education was not one of those things that they prioritize this time around.
Definitely, yes.
So I think it also depends on who is in power and what are they prioritizing, what are the voices of the people. Most of the time people get up there and then they forget the needs of society.
True.
They aim at, now we are going for an election, and that is where all the money should go. And they're leaving behind education, which is a cornerstone of development. So I think it is a very valid point that you make. And also to note that education is a human right.
It is.
And with human rights, they have to be accessible, attainable, affordable, and they have to be of quality.
True.
So it's like education that we are having today of quality. That is basically the discussion that we are going to have today. So coming on to Sharon, I would still like your view on what do you think are the indicators of a quality education?
Okay, I think you said it all. But before I even go back to well qualities and all that, we need to appreciate that government has actually done has taken specific strides to improve this kind of the education system that we're having as a country. Because when you compare what the Ugandan education system was back then and what now it is, it then means that there are very many big things that have been done. For example, the gender disparities that have been on, you see now both girls and boys, the numbers are still kind of increasing and all that, so let's not actually ignore that. But even when it comes to things like priorities and all that, maybe I really don't want to go into politics. It's not my cup of tea. But back to what I think quality education looks like is us having, do we have the accessibility? Do individuals have accessibility to attend this specific kind of educational programs? Go to schools, UCE. How many people actually have access to them? How many individuals have access to UPE and all that. That is the kind of quality that we're talking about. But also, back to then the schools, do we have the infrastructure that is necessarily meant to be there? Now that is where her point comes in, whereby personally, I studied in Chirambwe Girls, and I feel like it's not about the G8 schools, the Navsusas, SMARC, what and what. It's about the kind of, you see, it's just the kind of mentality that we have developed, that you see, if I don't go to the grade 8 schools, I won't make it, or I want to do. That's why when you're going to look for a job, someone is like, people have that mentality of,
But is it a valid point?
It could be a valid point, but there is a reason as to why then these schools are branded the grade 8 schools. Maybe that they offer that kind of quality, and most of these schools are private schools. Yeah, it's not like they are government aided and all that. They are private schools, meaning they have the sort of quality that people feel this specific education needs to have. One, what do they have? They have the infrastructure, they have the laboratories, they have the libraries, they have all those things. Do they pay their teachers well? That is something that we actually tend to ignore, because for us to have that kind of quality education, the kind of quality that we need, starts right away from the ground. Are these teachers being paid? Do they, you see, we are having a lot of strikes between the arts teachers and the science teachers, whereby you're seeing the increasing salaries of science teachers, and arts teachers are just being left at that point. But also, what else do we think like quality education looks like? Quality education looks like these schools having being able to access the kinds of funds that government puts on table. For example, if the budget is set for specific things, do these schools actually, let's say the government schools, do they access the specific kind of funds for infrastructure, for scholastic materials at the end of the day? One thing I need to understand is, one, I understand that Uganda's kind of economy is sort of advancing and decreasing at the same time, so it is unreliable at the end of the day. My biggest question is, regardless of the kind of quality, do these individuals, maybe let's say kids from Karamoja, are they able to access this kind of education even when the US is there and the UPE is there? Are these individuals able to go there? You see, we kind of forget the kind of challenges that these individuals are actually facing. We may say the quality is there, but are they able to access them? Because I'm sure if any individual has the money then to send their kids to the grade 8 schools, yeah, they're able to put them there. I don't think there is a problem. And government still has the capability and the obligation to make these government schools look like the private schools. That is why when you compare and see, people will always tell you, other people who are going to private schools are people who have the money, who have the what and all that. But who are the people going there? Everyone has the capability of going there. It is just our pockets that limit us. It's like how I be like, oh, today I want to eat CJs. Does my pocket allow me to eat the CJs? Or I'm going to stick to company food, or I'm going to stick to where I'm working from, and all that. But regardless of all that, we need to understand that government has actually really put a big stride in making sure that we get this sort of quality, despite the fact that we have challenges come along the way, as she says, the infrastructure. How do these schools look like? How does the road to this specific school look like? Yeah? And most cases, you see, you can't blame government for specific things. For example, in most cases, when you look at the high levels of dropouts from schools, you can't say then, we can't rule out and be like government does it, is not to blame. At some point it is for a specific reason. But at the end of the day, we need to look at if we address this kind of specific problems that the education system finds, things like low development in infrastructure, the high levels of dropouts. Why are then girls dropping out more than the boys? What, like that kind of gender disparities and all that. I think when we address that, I think then the kind of quality we want actually comes in at the end of the day. But even when he says that, you see, some point is like the aid by other people pulling out. Yeah, I get the education is mainly the obligation of the government, civil society, partners from different countries, or even different partnerships that the government could actually get for us. But we look at the kind of education we want. Back to your question, Sharon, is the quality that we need as citizens or as students is, am I able to to attend class? Yes. Do I have the good quality teachers? Yes. Am I having a free environment? Because the biggest challenge you have right now is when you even go to, because even if we say that less people go to this thing, to private schools like SMAC, things like Joginsa, things like Gayaza, things like Nabisosa, we are now finding a biggest number of people doing what? Joining these specific schools. High levels of people joining, even if government provides this kind of education. We are now having a problem of overcrowding and all that in this kind of classes. And now that then beats off the issue of quality education, because the class is crowded, teachers are few, or high, because they are less motivated to come, and they don't have that sort of incentive to come and teach. Because I believe if they don't have the incentive, because the incentive they have is, oh, I'm going to work, I'm going to teach because I'm doing what? I'm going to be paid. But if someone is going to be underpaid, then that means we are removing the issue of quality, because now in most schools, they're going to now begin bringing about teachers because they feel like these ones won't ask for more money. So if I provide a diploma, or if I provide a specific certificate and all that, that is why I think we need to understand what quality in and itself looks like. Quality looks like us having the accessibility. Do we, the citizens, have, or the students have the accessibility to this kind of schools? If yes, then that would say we have the kind of quality. But secondly, do these schools have the funding? Do they have the resources, the required resources? If we are meant to do a practical, am I now meant to go to a different school to do this kind of practical, or my school has this kind of thing? Also, is there a space for this sort of individuals? Do they give me the time? That is a kind of quality education. That's how quality to me looks like. I don't know about
And I really want to agree with her.
Yeah, but you really want to, but you don't.
I agree with you.
Okay.
Because you look at, if you're talking about accessibility, you look at the infrastructure. For instance, we can talk about the people in islands. There have been stories on NTV and other media. Realize there are challenges. There is recently a story that I was seeing. I can't remember exactly the island, but I think it's in Wakiso, at the shores of Lake Victoria. I think they only have a primary school there, and there's no secondary school. So you have to go to the next island to access a secondary school. But these are people who have their source of earnings from the lake, and their source of income is very, very, very low, and they cannot afford that.
Yeah.
And so that's when government has to come in. But also when she talking about the resources, because education is far beyond someone going to class. It starts from even the teachers, so the human resource itself. How many people can attend university, study as teachers, okay? How many can afford, and when they come back, how much are you paying them? That they have this moral when they stand before the students or the pupils, at least they are sure they have families, and these families are well off, they are okay. Or even that you go to schools, and the teacher in the school where they are teaching, their children cannot go to those particular schools. Okay, they cannot. Yeah, they cannot afford those particular schools. So how do you tell me this teacher is standing before us teaching us, when they are very sure that their children are at home seated?
Yes.
Okay? So that also affects our education system and so many other things that she has mentioned.
Yes, those are some of the challenges that are affecting the education sector. And you mentioned, Sharon, you mentioned the rate of dropouts, and girls are mainly affected by certain things. For example, their menstrual periods. Those in rural areas drop out because they cannot access sanitary towels. So it has been an argument that I've gotten a hold of, especially from last year, when people were coming out and they were advocating that if we have free condoms, then why can't we have free sanitary towels? To keep a girl in school, it is that simple. If you can advocate for people on a massive scale to go out, have sex, protected sex, then why can't you advocate for a girl child to stay in school and just give her a free sanitary towel? So thank you. But we should not also neglect the fact that indeed government has made strides towards, making education accessible. And also on the UNICEF website, as I was reading through today, they stated that back then in 2011, you would find 2 out of 11 would attain school, would attain access and be able to go to school. But then today we have 4 out of 10, which is slow, but at least it's a better improvement.
Sharon, it shouldn't be just about people attending school.
They should be able to. Yes.
Let's check if this person is going to school, what are they attaining from there? What are they getting from there? It's not just a matter of going through school, but we want to get this person.
They should be able to attain a quality.
Yes, it's okay.
education.
What can they bring to the table after?
yes. In terms of knowledge, innovation, skills, I think that should be something that you should pay attention to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Nyombi. So coming to Julius, we'd like to really hear your views about how, if you think that there are any gaps between the curriculum and the industrial needs, that when these people are out of education, out of this system, this long system, I don't know how many years it is, they match what is needed out there. Is it only those in private institutions that are able to match the quality that is required when you get out? What about those in in government schools?
To begin with, I will thank you for the host. I also thank the panelists for the contributions they have made. Talking about education, and I would want to also clearly state it, that as like Jesse said, this is a right. We're talking about a right that's supposed to be guaranteed to everyone. If you read the Constitution, I think under National Objective 18, the wording there sounds to be a little clear, that the government is going to provide free, basic, compulsory education to all citizens. So the question on whether they have lived to walk the talk under the Constitution is another different story altogether. You have asked on the quality and the product of the students, both in private and government institutions. Yes, we cannot undermine the fact that there is a lacuna which needs to be addressed in as far as that quality is concerned. Otherwise, I know of employees who still think that a student from maybe a certain school X, a certain university X cannot do much other than someone from X, Y, and Z. But before even we look at the product, because a product comes after a certain kind of process. So the process that is leading us to this kind of products must be the issue to deal with. I think not to repeat what my colleagues have said, I'll look more into the decision makers. People have talked about the priorities, people have talked about what, but the decision makers per se. I know for sure, you talked of in the question I had an aspect of the new curriculum. There is this new curriculum that we are still testing, and we are finding out how, probably I think these people that have just graduated, it's the vast bunch of students to graduate with this new curriculum. So I can't speak much about it, for it has not lived a test yet. However, in as far as those that had a test of the Matthew Bukenyas and the rest in the old curriculums, I can guarantee there was a lacuna, and I pray that this new curriculum addresses it, because there is no guarantee that someone, just like they have said, that it's not all about entering class. What you pick from class sounds or speaks more to the product you're going to be. That if at all I'm in a physics class and I'm learning about the operation of a generator, and to that extent I can never even pull a generator to make it make sound in as far as making it create power or creating power is concerned, there is a problem. If we have people that are aspiring to be, for example, land surveyors, and all they do is to sit in class and they give them notes on how to survey land, so the process needs to be a little bit more practical. When it becomes a little bit more practical, to that extent I'm certain, and there is no doubt, that the outcome shall be fruitful. And this comes in both fields, both private and government. And I think, let me even make it more clear, there is no guarantee that a person from a school, a local school, cannot stand out to be exceptional. I think it's a matter of attitude to some extent. It's a matter of the energy and the zeal these students has towards this entire thing of learning. But the bottom line remains one. In as far as the product is concerned, we have to look more into the process that leads to this product. Education should be accessible to everyone. And it being accessible, when a child gets an opportunity to enter class, you should make sure that what they are benefiting, what they're getting, what are picking from these lecturers, these teachers, and any kind of moderator, it is that is needed. Let it be more practical. If you're speaking about medicine, let the student have a chance to get into the fields and understand things at a practical basis. It is only then that we shall have people that are knowledgeable both theoretically and practical. And I have no doubt that if the government focuses on the practical aspects, which is doing in this new curriculum, because if you look at their way of studying, they have more assessments, they have more, which are cumulative. I think they have reduced on the theory. And I think if we try this new curriculum, it might be a good test, and it will bring the products that we need. And as far as accessibility is concerned, now I would speak basically for the rural person who may not be in position to go to the G8s like I've had. The government has a role, and this one I request, I invite all of you to go look at the wording of, I think it's the wording of Article 30 and the wording of National Objective in 18. The wording, the Constitution was clear that it's going to do its mandate to provide free compulsory education. To be sincere, in the late 90s, and in the late 90s, it really tried with bringing up the use and UPE. However, there are questions as to has it really lived the rationale behind its being put in place? Because now you realize that if in 1995 it was a trend for someone to go to school without open shoes, why is it still the trend in the 21st century? So all those questions come into play. So you mean the government cannot provide basic things like books, uniforms, and what for a child to be comfortable in a school? Truth be said, we cannot all go to the G8s. That would be a lie. However, there can be a platform where we can have a leverage that if that person or that student are in a school that is considered as a universal secondary education institution, if they can have also that kind of teacher who's as qualified as that one in a G8, I think it would be one of the good remedies for the government, because for private it's understandable that you're bringing in money that then has to be used to pay the teachers. For government, let the government then aid for these kind of teachers in these other sectors that are UP and UC. The bottom line remains one, that in as far as improving the use and UP schools is concerned, the government needs to take a step forward to make sure that these institutions, not only are they having better infrastructures, but also the quality of teachers that go there are those that can be employed in a G8. And I believe if there is harmonization, then we shall have the same quality and the output shall also be kind of similar or closely the same. Yeah.
And thank you so much, Julius, for that. He believes if there is harmonization in those two areas, then the quality will surely be improved. We mentioned in this segment that having an education is not just about going through the education process. It matters what kind of teachers are there in that, in those schools, in those institutions, are there infrastructure, what about the uniforms? Because the government may provide free education in primary institutions, but then parents still have to pay for uniforms. Some of them still pay for meals. They are requested to bring sacks of sugar, posho, carry these things. These things are bought with money. So you are still incurring for your child just to attain an education. So that has been our very first segment, and we shall be back after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break. It is still the Inter-University Debate Show. And as we had established already, that education is indeed a right that is guaranteed by the Constitution. It is inherent, and all citizens of Uganda have a right to education. And we also ascertained that it is a human right, therefore it should be attainable, affordable, accessible, and it should be of quality. So continuing our discussion today on the topic, the cost of education versus the quality of education. Moving to Adwet Alex, who is our guest, and I would like to pose a question to you. What are the various support systems or resources that students can rely on to navigate the education costs?
Thank you so much for that question, Sharon. One of the strongest mechanisms I can say is scholarships. But getting those scholarships in Uganda is also something else. Most especially for people who have tried to get the, I don't know if I'm supposed to mention this here, but you cut it out just in case I'm not saying, the advanced scholarships. I believe a number of us have tried, but at a point I feel like they are just put there for publicity, because I never see people's names being released or something. So I feel it's like a publicity
So there is never a
stunt.
list
I feel
of
I've never
successful-
seen I've never seen yeah, exactly. I've never seen someone come out and say I'm a beneficiary of this and what. So we need genuine scholarships. Genuine scholarships. At least I know some of the few places that give genuine scholarships are maybe churches. Some churches do give genuine scholarships. And then maybe some foreign organizations, NGOs. But then also, you know, we are Uganda, we are a third world country, and therefore those scholarships also come in with conditions, just like we saw how USAID pulled out because we refused to endorse LGBTQ. So that is also an issue. And then even for the girl children, I have heard stories from so many of my friends who have tried to get scholarships, but these scholarships come with, you must sleep with me. If you don't sleep with me, I'm not giving you this scholarship. So even our way out looks like there is no way out.
Are those like organizational scholarships?
Yeah, some are
individuals.
No. Some are organizational, but you go to them and they tell you this is the person in charge. Now when you reach the person in charge is like, you have to do this before I give you this.
Okay.
So it becomes another issue. So we need genuine scholarships. Honestly, in Uganda, I don't think I've seen any genuine scholarship.
But do educational institutions also offer these scholarships? Like
Yes,
maybe
they do, but how much? Yes, they do, but how much? I'm from UCU, and for you to get a scholarship there, it has to be mostly sports. In fact, it is sports. And I see the way these people work for their scholarship, and oh my God, they work for their scholarships. They really work for them. Because now if you're, to begin with, if you're a student of law, you can't even go into the sports field that you see, you can't.
Sure.
So now that automatically cuts law students whose tuition is as high as, I don't know what, out of getting that scholarship, of that mechanism. So it breaks my heart that a law student cannot get the scholarship because of their course. And those who get those scholarships have to work themselves
Extremely
out
hard.
exactly to maintain those scholarships. So and then when you go to secondary schools, you'll find the scholarship can be like half bursary, which doesn't amount, and still a parent has to provide for this child at school and all that.
Most of the schools today, most of the ones that I know of are 2 million and above.
Exactly, and then they will tell you they're giving you
2.5.
half. They are giving you half of 2 million, yet a parent still can't afford the other million. Make it make
So
sense.
yes, it's still a bit very costly.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Alex, for that. Coming on to Nyombi, what do you think are the policy reforms that we need to make this education more affordable? Because as mentioned, yes, there are scholarships in place, but then now these scholarships are not really helping a lot of people. And even though someone gets a scholarship, there is still that very big gap that is left, that financial gap that is left that they have to fill. So it is like the scholarship is not really helping. So what do you think?
Like my sister Alex, I'm not going for favors. Okay, if someone is offering to give us scholarships, that's good. We shall appreciate. But like my brother said, there is someone that has a constitutional mandate to give us education. That cannot be bargained
Disputed.
or even compromised. Under Article 30, everyone has the right to education. Article 31, 32, the right to children, right for children. It's the responsibility of the state, first the state, and even the parents, okay, to ensure that we have quality education. Now, I talked about priorities, okay. When you read the report for the Right to Education Project, I think it was in 2012, they looked at the challenges why we are having problems with our education system, and they talked about understaffing. That should be addressed, okay? Where schools, you find a school, the primary teacher in primary 1 is teaching 3 subjects in 4 classes or 3 classes, okay? We should address that. And secondly, the inadequate accommodation also for teachers. Because I told you the biggest percentage of pupils are going to government schools, UPE, USA. So in our funding priorities, instead of spending money on ghost teachers, let's have accountability for these funds, ensure that they are staff quotas, okay? Teachers are well paid. I want to disagree with people who say we don't have money. Yes, we may not have enough money, but how are we spending the little that we are having?
But
okay?
we do, given the budget that was
in terms
made
of
and the
resource
salaries.
allocation,
Yes,
then that's where I have a problem.
yes.
We can really spend the little we have appropriately, and everyone will be satisfied. Then, in terms of resource allocation, realize from the budget, like I said, our national budget, education takes the fourth, and what is going to the different sectors, you really have to question because it doesn't match up. Okay, we should be looking at that as well. So having accountability, things to do with corruption, we realize money is sent to the districts to cater for maybe particular schools, and this is swindled. It is stolen. Okay, so we should be looking at strengthening our institutions, the IGG, the police, accountability committees, that of parliament, and even at the lower levels. Okay, then we talked about when she was starting. She talked about these private institutions, secondary schools, and even universities that are charging exorbitant fees, whereas there is liberalization of our economy. Okay, can we try to train in? Because education shouldn't be something like a commodity. This bottle of water I can decide, because you have a choice. You can buy this or even boil your water at home, come with it at work. But I have no choice of where to go. Everyone is not going to go and open up a school. Because it's a responsibility of someone to give me that I cannot afford to start up a school to teach myself individually or even teach my family, my siblings. So if you open up the space for private players, can you rein in and say, okay, you are asking for too much, for more than people can afford, because this is the service. Okay, so you cannot punish people for the service that's totally exploitation, because some of these schools are exploiting the parents. There'll be a space and okay, at least if I don't want to go to a public school, if I choose to go to a private one, I should also be able to afford that one. Okay, otherwise it's being exploitative. But also on the other side, you can also sympathize with them. The kind of economy that we are in, things are expensive, inflation, and also goes back to government. Can we have subsidies for these private institutions? Scholastic materials, can we reduce the taxes, okay, on the resources that these people are using? But if you're having, you're overtaxing each and everything, that makes education more costly. Even if I do not want to go to public school, going to the private school will be more expensive. This is just a service, okay?
Yes.
Then lastly, can we look at the embracing digitalization and technology? And still this goes back to, because government is the biggest player in this education sector. You cannot run away from it.
But
Okay?
it has failed.
Because
What do we do?
still there's nowhere we can go. We must go back to it and tell them this is what, let's remind them of their duties.
So for how long shall
Okay.
we wait for to?
Now, this is 2025. In January, I'm told we're having elections.
You're told.
You're told.
Okay, I think we're having elections, aren't we?
Mm.
So I think it's the responsibility of everyone to ensure that you put into power people who are going to deliver on what you are entitled to. Okay? So that's also a different conversation that we can
That's
have.
for another day.
True. That's
Alright.
just altogether a
Another
different
day.
conversation.
Yeah, because it zeroes down to those that are in charge of our economy and every other sector. And these are the people in government, the central
Yes,
government.
as you've mentioned, at the end of the day, they're going to make the policies.
Yes.
So those policies have to be able to represent what the people want and the needs of the people.
Absolutely.
But then now we are lagging behind because we find that the prices, the costs in private institutions are way high. But what is the excuse? We are also taxed. So if the taxes can go a bit down because of the policy they may put in place, then also all the
So it goes down to government. If you can forgive Bujagali, I hear these other conversations, after every 10 years, you're saying we are giving them this kind of taxes. How about the education sector? The institutions of learning, universities, the secondary schools? Because this is the human resource that you're building for the next 10 years. Okay? And so if someone's just going through school with that pride, I've gone to primary, I've gone to secondary, at the end of the day, what are they bringing out? Can you employ this person? If it's not about employment, can they sit down and innovate? Okay? I think it's my brother, council, that talked about the new curriculum. With the 20,000 that I told you that they are giving us capitation grant to a pupil in primary, and between 135 and 150,000 for a secondary school student, I tell you even the new curriculum is just on paper. Okay? Because there's no school that's going to get the resources that they require for the 150,000 you're giving to them to teach these students in secondary, to get those resources using the 150,000. That 150,000 is catering. Remember, the president has been saying parish should not provide food. Okay? Government has given that, pays, because he actually even doesn't talk about the money they're giving them. They're giving to the schools. But never so many. Okay, education for all. But I tell you, a student who has gone to school without food, a teacher who is underpaid, but even teachers I've ever taught, but not here. I've ever taught in Apros in Rwanda. But the standards are quite different. Okay? You realize here teachers struggle even to get chalk. Okay? The classrooms where these people are carrying the duty, they are in bad condition. Okay? A staff room that could only accommodate maybe 5 people, they are there 100. Now we are in the digital era. How many schools have got computers? Just go back to your village. Okay? I come from Busavara. There's Busavara Primary School, which is a government-aided school. For the times I've been there, if there's a computer, it's only in the head teachers. And these people are competing with those at Kampala parents. Okay? So you look at that, you can't say there's no money. Okay? There is money, but how we are prioritizing. So we should be looking at all those things. I was telling my sister here, the budget that goes to the education sector, according to the UNICEF report, I think this was in, if I remember very well, almost over half goes to salaries and wages. So what remains for this student? Less than 50%. Really? So we should try and see that we make things better.
As a country, we should prioritize education. We should look to our future because education is the future.
It is.
It is the key to success. Although some people claim that the key has changed, but it is still largely education. It is still largely education, and as various stakeholders, us educators, students, we should take part and ensure that education is affordable, accessible, because your voices matter. Your voices are what that is going out there to those legislators to make policies that favor all of us as Ugandans. Thank you so much, Nyombe, for that. Sharon, I would like your opinion on the same, to know what support systems or mechanisms that are in place for students to rely on in order to navigate their education costs, given that right now in education institutions, especially universities, the tuitions are way too high. What are you going to advise a student who is, for example, at a certain university in Mukono and is paying 4 million per semester? What other avenues can they navigate to ensure that they get through education?
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Okay, I think personally, we live within our means, yeah? If I can't afford a 4 million university, why then go there? Not in bad faith, but I feel sometimes we need to understand where we fall.
So where do you suggest that we should go?
No, I don't want to suggest where people should go, because it's the same thing as saying before.
There must be an alternative.
There is always an alternative, regardless. That's the same thing I said. If you can't afford the GH schools, you're able to afford the other schools. Yeah? Same thing. If I can't afford UCU, where I'm paying 4M, let me go look for another university that I'm going to pay less. Yeah? Because I'm not saying that you're going to another university to pay 200,000. No.
But then don't you think that would be infringing on your right to education?
No, it's fair, guys. Let's be guided, yeah? It is not infringing on anyone's right if you can't afford something. If I can't, I have a right to eat chicken. But if I can't afford it, I should stick to my
Beans.
As Asha said. Like sometimes we expect to put ourselves on a standard that we can't afford. This is the same thing, I think, when you're joining university and you want to live a life that you can't afford, yeah? Same thing. You see, even as she says that, you see, in most cases, these scholarships come with strings attached and all that. Now, this is the problem. I don't, out of on a scale of 1 to 10, I would agree with what she said on a scale of 5 to 6. Fine, let's first put aside the part of the strings attached to, or if you want me to help you do this, it's an exchange, yeah? But I think the biggest problem is, even when there are scholarships, the biggest problem in Uganda is that these scholarships are not gotten by the people who need them. This is a thing people fail to understand at some point. Because when you look at the government scholarships that come at university, seriously, fine, I've worked and I've performed well, yeah, I deserve that sort of scholarship because I've performed well and all that. But there is that one person who has the urge, who has the will to learn and all that. But these scholarships are not basically, it's not put out there that these scholarships are for, because seriously, if I'm able to pay the 4 million at UCU, why then should I get a scholarship? Because someone else who is also in the same category is not, same thing. Like, it's the same thing I'm telling us, that people who get these scholarships are not the people who are meant to get them, because these scholarships are put there for these individuals who are not able to, let's say, fund themselves fully, who are not able to access specific things. That is why you look at, when you look at things like BRAC coming out to help these sort of individuals, because people have actually testified BRAC has helped them out. Foundations have come out, NGOs have helped these sort of individuals. But until when shall these individuals be helped by these sort of organizations at the end of the day? It necessarily now depends on how we think about, because if BRAC is funding me and I never think of the alternative. So now this is where then I think our education system lacks a part of creativity. And this then comes back to us, because if I'm in a university that is, for example, I'm in Chambogo. It's not because maybe I can't afford the other universities or something, but I live within my means, yeah? Because either way, she has said, 4 million when you compare to like the kind of tuition, that is why we have private schools. And like there is always an alternative. Like we can't say, because everyone now is pushing it to the government. But let's not forget that regardless of the government, we as parents, we as students have the obligation to make sure we put ourselves on a standard that we want to go to. For example, government may do its best. For example, like as I talked about the gender disparities, the things like dropouts of these individuals from schools. Fine, we have a lot to do in terms of things like why these individuals are dropping out of school. One was already said, we looked at maybe teenage pregnancy, early marriages, and all that. This is because these things are not happening because we are not aware. Yeah, these things are happening because of maybe we are neglecting a specific part of our responsibility. Because now you can't say my family is not going to eat because the government has increased taxes. My family is not going to eat because the government has failed to do specific things at the end of the day. As a person, you always have to have a sort of an alternative. Same thing as when it comes to scholarships. I feel like these scholarships, government here should try to maybe, because most of these scholarships, yes, are for people like sports. Maybe you find some schools offer scholarships in terms of what kind of combination are you doing. If you go to schools, you find a person doing PCB, PCM, and the ones having this sort of scholarships, yeah? And you don't blame them then to say that if they are doing it half, because if I'm paying 4 million, really, and the university has helped me to pay for like a 2M, yeah? You see the problem is, Ugandans, sometimes we forget that someone is helping you, yeah? Because I've given you food doesn't mean every day I'm going to do what? I'm going to give you. So if I've decided, if the government is now, because how many people are we in the country, yeah? We forget that government also has other responsibilities to do. Despite the fact that at some point they may have misplaced priorities, like they have not kind of prioritize a specific section, yeah? Because if that is the same thing to say that, oh, we want, let's say, to give more scholarships and all that, the health sector is going to come. We are still, our problems never end. That's the truth. Today is education, tomorrow is going to be the health sector, tomorrow is going to be another specific sector and all that. And government in and itself does not really, it's not going to come. Why does government get this money at the end of the day? From us, the citizens. Because do we pay taxes? Yes. Do we do this? Hold on. So that is why I think Nyambi's issue of saying, yeah, I get the kind of quality we need in education is something that matters. But we as students, are we creative at the end of the day? Are you trying to find means as alternatives to, because as you see, sometimes we study things and you're like, but I'm studying, but after this, what next? Am I going to just sit? No, that is what is given to you, but For example, I did social work and social administration. It is one of the courses that have been out there, and like, why are you doing this? What are you going to get? And all that. At the end of the day, there are specific courses that individuals do, and they're like, this person is going to get a job. It is the biggest course. It is what, yeah? So other courses are kind of underlooked, even in government itself, because if the president can say, someone doing SOSA can do ABCD, blah, blah, blah. But I think we need to understand, like, that's why I said, we live within our means. If you can't afford something for 4M, there are alternatives. I think before we came here, we were urging about Cavendish, IU, urging about things like Chambogo and all that, yeah? There are very many upcoming. There is, what university were you talking about? SETA University.
Yes.
You could, if you can't afford Chambogo.
What to say it?
SETA is not in bad faith, but we need to learn, because private schools, that is why there are always two things. We have a private school and a government school. But the only problem is that now the biggest issue we have is, if government can only now modernize the government schools, and maybe the kind of policy, like to make sure that they have the scholastic materials, other books there, other laboratories there.
And I think at the end of the day, that's why people are
choosing to opt to go to private, because private schools have all those things, yeah? But if then, I think my biggest issue is if government can only find means of putting things like infrastructure in these specific schools, because I can't say that maybe all students should go to private schools, no. But the reason why government schools are there, the reason why they're there is to help on us, the people who can't afford the private schools, or to help on specific kind of things. So the biggest policy I think they could put is, because you can't say they are going to reduce tuition or they are going to reduce school fees at the end of the day, because if you look at the kind of money a nursery child is paying, for example, when you go to Aga Khan, you go those other schools around. Someone's tuition in nursery is my tuition at university times 2. Yeah. Is my school fees I paid in secondary. Yeah. And the more the economy keeps raising, the more these kind of things keep also raising. Because trust me, when you go to university, because as the tuition you used to pay, it's not the tuition she pays, right? The tuition they used to pay is not the same tuition someone else is paying.
Because our currency
keeps depreciating all the time. And I know that's something we need to understand. Because you see the problem with Nyombi is it keeps pushing everything to the government. But you see, they have the source. As I said, if someone quoted me in the first place, I said, we all have a responsibility to something. Yes. The government is responsible for specific things. Yes, you have a right to live. But if I go outside there and I live recklessly, are you going to blame the government for my recklessness? No. If my parents are able to afford school fees and pay the tuition, and I go outside there and fail, or I decide to drop out because maybe I've involved myself in things like peer groups, gambling and all that, are you now going to blame the government? No, you see, sometimes we kind of be narrow in our kind of thinking, because we think the government is going to be there all the time to provide for us. If I drop out of school, I'm going to be like, government at Yambe. But what have you done to help yourself?
Or what do you want?
What do you... Sometimes we don't even know what we want as Ugandans. At some point, we do not know what we want. So I think when we look at now the kind of education system we're on, because sincerely speaking, our kind of education system is one that is appreciative, yeah, because you're able to understand. Yes, it might have inconsistencies, but it is something that has gotten a little bit of gotten to a specific level. So I think the best way government can actually do specific things is, individuals roads there to take me to these schools, yeah. As I said, accessibility and affordability is something that is important to this kind of thing. Yes, scholarships might be there, but who are the people benefiting from these scholarships? She has talked about talents. People with their talents, I appreciate that, because you're working for your talent. The reason as to why maybe you wouldn't allow someone doing law to go into sport is because the kind of time...
It's not like it doesn't allow. It allows, but the time
because if you're in I used to be a sports person until I kind of decided to look for other things. So this is the thing.
But not tired.
But you see, for example, a sports person who is playing basketball, when you look at a school like Noah Girls is a school that so known in basketball. Yeah. When this smack something, yeah, these individuals, you have to sacrifice your specific time for class to go and, because this is something that is, it's like a job. It's like a job, yeah? Something when it comes to scholarships. Scholarships in sports, I appreciate, like, they're given to people, most of these guys who are doing sports and all that. But my biggest problem, for example, when you come into university, government scholarships, look at the kind of people who have received this kind of scholarships. Most of them can afford to pay for themselves. Like, I get.
I just want to supplement.
Yeah.
There are also this state house scholarships. I want to understand how someone gets them, because I've been in class with so many people, and it's, this one is on state scholarship. And I'm wondering, but meanwhile, the people on state scholarship can ideally
afford
and even pay for the whole class.
Yeah, but this is what I think the problem we have is, I want to believe that there are organizations that want to fund or help in terms of education and all that. We are seeing NGOs, apart from this time whereby funds have been cut, and at some point it is kind of limited, yeah? But I want to believe that there are organizations, as I didn't about the state scholarships. I need to look for
it's hard to get such people.
But you see, as I said, it is about technical knows who. Technical knows who. Do I know Nyombi? Is Nyombi in government? Yes. Can I stick on him and get what I want? Yes. Does Nyombi know him? But I'm able to pay tuition. He is not able to pay it. But because I know Nyombi, the biggest priority is going to go to Sharon, not him. You get? There are organizations that do these things, but the kind of, would I call, we're talking of accessibility. Not transparency, kind of awareness. For example, just things like state scholarships, people need to know, like how everyone knows about the government scholarships.
Like that is it.
Everyone knows about BRAC. Yeah? Everyone knows about like Rich for Hand and all that. There are organizations, but there are those organizations that do these things, but they are not given so much attention, or they are not given that sort of platform to like, that sort of awareness. Like you go to schools and tell them, but you see, if you can't afford this.
But then don't you think at the end of the day, it's also up to the organization?
Yes, it is up to the organization. Yes, it is up to the organization. But as I say, the kind of criteria, people use to select, because it is a whole process. For example, BRAC. It's not like you're going to go there and be like, oh, you see, I can't afford tuition.
Unfortunately, it closed.
Yeah, you see?
To scholarships.
To scholarships. But even if it hadn't closed, there is a process, that kind of scrutiny. As I said, it's about technical and also even the government scholarship. People who get these things, for example, people who are doing all this kind of thing, someone is able, now you find Nyombi having a government scholarship. But Nyombi is able to get food, because these guys are given tuition, they are given allowances, yeah? They're given everything. The only thing you need to do is go to campus and study.
But then, Sharon, as you talk about that, can you also try to look at the numbers? Because government, apparently, it can only pay for about 4,000 students at university. Makerere alone has over 15,000, I think about 20,000 students every year that they're passing out. So at my campus, IU, just Kampala campus, I think the number is about 4,000. So, and we're having many universities in Uganda. That means if the government, as it stands now, if it decided to pay for students and said, okay, we are only paying for those students in IU, because that's the number now, IU accommodates about 4,000. Look about the others now in the different universities.
Let's first cut out the Gamba.
Nyombi, what you need to do, Nyombi, listen,
the loan
I think,
scheme. You can only afford
you see?
to pay for about 5,000, but still when you try to investigate, do they even pay for those students? They are struggling, and even those who access these funds for the higher education, students financing something.
Yeah,
still.
Nyambi, you see, this is a thing you need to
Yes.
understand. I think the biggest problem we have is the more we keep, I think the biggest thing government needs to do is find ways of subsidizing costs, or maybe subsidizing things like
Yeah.
tuition.
And
Because if you say that they are going to,
they cannot pay for everyone.
they can't provide. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, yes, I think they can.
They
I don't
may
know
not
about
provide.
the free
They may
education,
not provide.
but they can't do it because if you look at the kind of population, it means if they're not going to do that, it means that other sectors are going to be less prioritized.
You cut
But
your cost.
I think
according to your
so
law.
this
Okay?
is what I think they need to do.
So it's-
Yes.
yeah.
Are they able to have to educate, like for example, this new curriculum? Some teachers are actually still struggling to because personally I'm an elder sister, but I'm struggling to understand what is on the report. Yeah. So if me personally I'm struggling, what about a teacher who is actually, because they also now to be put in class to be taught this kind of curriculum that they've brought on table. Yeah.
Sharon, let's just look at even when the results came back, we were jubilating over what we didn't know.
Yeah, because if
Now
I'm
going back to school, the senior fives, them themselves, they don't know what they're studying.
So
Actually, they delayed to go back because the teachers had to go back, they had to
understand
rethink,
what
and then
they are
the
trying
funds
to
were not
study.
even there for
So,
the new curriculum, A level, and
So-
I'm wondering,
So
why didn't we stick to
government
our
just
old
needs to,
curriculum?
lastly, government needs to just sit down and put things straight. Yeah. Who are receiving these scholarships? A, B, C, D. Yeah. Are they subsidizing the costs of kind of education? Education is expensive. That's the truth. Yeah.
Sure.
Because for now, at least when now go to university, one has to pay tuition. Like for example, there are things I pay for, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, the different costs that are
Yeah. So
involved for one to be to complete an education.
So
at
I think
university.
for it could be okay if the kind of money we pay is actually what we get in return. That is my biggest issue. Sometimes people don't really mind about the money, but it's like when I go and buy a cloth, I've spent 100,000, but you look at what you bought and you're like,
Is it worth that?
Where
was
was I
it? So
looking?
the millions, the 4 millions of money, the millions you're paying, are they worth what you've gotten? Are they worth your degree? Like, I mean, I think that we need to understand too. As I said, government has a responsibility to play. Civil societies have responsibilities to play, but us as individuals, parents, we also have a sort of, so we don't just throw everything to
Yeah, okay, thank you so much, Sharon, for that view. As you've rightly stated, most of the times the quality of education is not matching the costs that we are paying for the education. And that has been our discussion today, looking at education, it being a right that everyone should indeed recognize because it is an inherent right and it is guaranteed by the Constitution. And education should be free, accessible, and it should be attainable and also of good quality, so that what goes in comes out as great as we expect it. So in our concluding remarks, Julius, anything you'd like to say to the viewers in a few, maybe 1 or 2 sentences?
In a few, 1 or 2 sentences, surely you realize that, and I will emphasize, I agree with my colleague when she speaks about all having a role to play, not leaving it for the government alone. Because at the end of it all, if I'm a parent, it doesn't mean that if the government decides to give free education, you're supposed to sit back and wait for the government to fulfill. But you talked of knowing where your standards are. And I agree sincerely, because there is no need of you wanting to buy a Lamborghini, yet even a home is a car. With that, my ending remarks are that even when we try to look for these other places that maybe where we fit, my humble plea and my clear thinking would be that the government still has a role to play. That even when I choose to take my child to a government institution, it still has a role to play. Some of us followed the parliamentary debates, I think it was this year, early this year when these guys were going back to school.
And people are complaining that, okay, the private sector, the amounts are overly, clearly the amounts are too big to pay. And even in the government sector, where you expect to be subsidized, people are paying these higher welfare, building, project management. You get? So if the government is indeed providing these free compulsory services as it is should do so under the National Objective 1418, it should ensure that in a manner of subsidizing these prices, it does so to the extent or to the extent that it will enable this person who has chosen to take their child to a government institution to also be in position to achieve the same objective like that was taken their child to Chitende.
Yes.
And that would be my humble plea. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Julius, for that. Any concluding remarks in 1 or 2 sentences from Adwet?
What I can say is we should give Caesar what belongs to Caesar. As she had said, I feel the pain for one who can't afford and is unable to receive, and then one who can afford and receives more. Let's be fair, let's do away with corruption, tribalism, everything that hinders the poor or the less privileged from receiving what they should have received. Yes, and I think we throw it back to the government, and as well I think policies here and there should be changed. Most especially to me, I look at the constitution and the way we put people into power. The aspect, when you look at the constitution, it says for one to stand for a position, for a parliamentary position, they should have a bare minimum of a senior 6 certificate. Ideally, to me, some of those people don't really understand the, can I say the importance of education, and therefore they will never prioritize it. And when you look at some of our MPs, some of them are actually getting papers when they are already in parliament. How did that happen? I believe if we had people with a bit higher papers, let's say a bachelor's, maybe a true bachelor's, like not just passing through the system, buying marks and all that, someone who worked for their marks and for their degree, probably they will know the importance of education and they will know why it should be a priority. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. I hope that is a clear message to all of us. Nyombi, your concluding remarks in 1 or 2 sentences.
Thank you, Sharon. There is a quote by Nelson Mandela that says, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Education is the pinnacle of everything. If you have quality education, then the health standards are, because you're going to produce better, actually the best doctors. If you give children the best quality education, you're going to get quality healthcare providers, engineers, all kinds of people from whatever field. So it should be something that we must take, have great concern for, and take as a priority. Okay, it's something that you should invest in as a country. IT, in everything. Okay, so let's take due consideration, invest in our education system, make things better. This is how countries are developed. You looked at countries like Singapore, even these like China, vocationalizing our education system will also change. Let's fund our education sector. And I believe we shall do well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This time around, education was not among the priorities in the national budget. So we are hoping for better next time. We are hoping that the leaders that we are going to elect are going to prioritize education, because it is the cornerstone of development. As Uganda, we are a developing country, and education is important to us. So Sharon, your concluding remarks to our viewers.
Thank you so much to our dear viewers. All I can say is we just need to understand where we fall, and before we push the blame to government, what have we done, we as citizens of the country? And if government is to help, what have we done for ourselves. That's it.
Thank you so much. That has been our show today on the topic, the cost of education versus the quality of education. We are hoping to hear your comment, to see your comments, and we hope you watch the show and subscribe to the Inter-University Debate Show. Thank you. Until next time.